Hello everybody, and welcome to a video that you have statistically almost certainly seen at least part of. If you haven't seen my Too Big to Walk video, which would have come out last week or the week before, this is a compilation of the 4 parts to my series on Red Raptor rights in one big video, which is then updated and annotated to add things that I missed or got wrong. Something else you may have noticed in recent videos, but just before I get into it, I'm just pointing this out, is up in the top right corner there's a little thing saying what music is being used at that point in the video. Links to every piece of music is available in the description, but yeah, you asked for that, so it's there, and without any further ado, let's get into the actual videos. I don't particularly like him because his videos are crammed full of terrible jokes, and it's not just that, he's also kind of a little tiny bit of a bigot who doesn't like trans people, and so I have had the misfortune of watching through all of his videos, and I will be basically pointing out everything wrong that he gets wrong in it, as well as particularly egregious jokes. If I pointed out every single joke he made, then we'd be here all day. But I guess that's it. I don't really have any intros for each of the segments, so I'll just get into them straight away. In his video about Jurassic Fight Club, he doesn't talk about the different, the 2 episodes that don't feature dinosaurs for some reason. For some reason, he feels the need to make a self-harm joke.
It's as if theropods regularly commit self-harm and mutilation.
He lets his right-wing bias slip in when he makes a joke about CNN being fake news.
Dang, I thought CNN was bad. The History Channel may hold the title for the champion of fake news.
Which is just dumb, as well as unfunny, and just factually incorrect.
Jurassic Fight Club claims in the episode T-Rex Hunter that because the tyrant had serrated teeth and Komodo dragons have serrated teeth, the former's teeth would have held rotten flesh, housing extra bacteria that slowly kills anything it bites. The hosts try to use this to raise the intensity of the fight, but it's pure garbage. Komodo dragons don't have special bacteria. We now know that they have venom glands in their mouths that pump anticoagulant into their bites.
He puts this in the lies section of his video, when the study that proved Komodo dragons to be venomous and not using bacteria to kill their prey didn't come out till 2009, the year after the series came out. And finally, for this segment, a 20-minute long video is not long enough to properly cover it as 12-hour series in enough, or really any depth, especially when it is crammed with jokes and unfunny memes.
It's impressive how the filmmakers found so many grassless locations to shoot in, since it didn't appear until after the Mesozoic.
If Red Raptor Rights had done this little thing that we like to call research here, he would know that more recent discoveries have discovered that grass actually dates back to the early Cretaceous, approximately 113 million years ago. Research could also prevent his incorrectly claiming that the environments of the Chinle and Morrison formations were accurate to what they should look like.
Late Triassic Arizona looks as it should, with the world more arid than it is today, especially within the interior of Pangaea. But there were wet and dry seasons, much like in the show. The Morrison Formation was a land of floodplains, with forests of cycads, conifers, and ferns that were fed on by the many large herbivores.
In reality, the Chinle was much more lush and wet, and the Morrison was much drier. For some reason, he claims that the Edmontosaurus design is almost perfectly accurate.
Edmontosaurus, called an Adatitan, were pretty spot on.
This is true if you ignore the many inaccuracies in the design, including but not limited to the fact it has a duck bill with no beak, it has no hooves, and its body is weirdly oriented.
Overall, the series didn't push too many wild theories and proved to be very conservative, to the point where it would make even Rand Paul proud.
I don't know why he felt it necessary to make this joke, especially since it actually doesn't make any sense, given that much of the speculation in Walking with Dinosaurs is actually not that conservative. And even if it was reasonably conservative, it would not be as conservative as Rand Paul, an arch-conservative libertarian, is. He states,
Ornitholestes was prominently featured
when it appears in all of 2 scenes, taking up only a couple of minutes of the 3 hours of total runtime.
Plateosaurus, which has only been found in Western Europe, decided to drop on by to Arizona for a heat stroke.
He claims there is no excuse for this, but in reality, at the time of production, Plateosaurus was a wastebasket taxon, and there were some remains potentially belonging to the genus known from North America.
Let's take Utahraptor. Awesome dinosaur. Where do you think Utahraptor is from? Apparently that was just too complicated for the writers, because they took the Utah Raptor and gave it a vacation in Europe.
With this, Red Raptor Rights is ignoring the fact that there was a completely reasonable justification for Utahraptor appearing in the UK, with this being because at the time it was believed that both Iguanodon and Polacanthus were found in America and Europe, so it was thought to be feasible at the time that Utahraptor could also be found on both continents, with this being compounded by the fact that they couldn't just use some other British dromaeosaur because there weren't any named at the time.
In the final episode, Dromaeosaurus quantum leaped to the end of the Cretaceous instead of dying out earlier.
He assumes these raptors, which are only called dromaeosaurs in the episode, are Dromaeosaurus, and that they aren't identified due to the fact that there were no named dromaeosaurs from Hell Creek at the time of production.
The narrator flat out stated that pterosaurs had fur, but none of this is shown.
Maybe if he actually watched the series, he would notice that several times pycnofibers are shown, especially on the physical models of the pterosaurs that appear. He puts this in the inaccuracies section.
Leilinosaura lacked its comedically long tail.
When A, that specimen wasn't discovered till 2009, 10 years after the episode's release, and B, it was later found that the specimen with the long tail could not be definitively assigned to Leilinosaura and is now thought to be an indeterminate ornithopod, possibly Leilinosaura. He also talks about the Neurognathus being outdated.
A Neurognathus looked like a generic pterosaur instead of its bizarre self.
But he mentions this in the inaccurate section rather than the outdated section, when the modern interpretation of it only being known about as of the late 2000s after the series was released. I will once again point out that in an accuracy review it should not be possible to rank its accuracy without taking into account every, or at least most, accuracies and inaccuracies, something impossible in a 16 minute, especially where about a quarter of the runtime is wasted on dumb and pointless jokes.
The feet were good enough to make Quentin Tarantino happy.
I don't know what to say here, what the fuck, man.
But in the 90s and 2000s, there was this strange rumor going around that the female theropods would have been bigger than the males.
It acts like this trope actually appears in the episode when it doesn't. There is a giant female that appears, but it's never stated that she is giant because she is a female. In fact, that it is a massively over-exaggerated size for an Allosaurus, but he doesn't mention that at all.
For starters, just the name Othnielia is invalid. It, along with Othnialosaurus and Drinker, have been synonymized with Nanosaurus.
He states this as if the BBC intentionally included an outdated genus, but, in fact, the Othnielia was not synonymized with Nanosaurus for at least 18 years after the episode released. Once again, despite only covering one 30-minute episode, he still doesn't cover every inaccuracy and accuracy, and still packs it with dumb, pointless jokes and memes.
For the name that got thrown out, Syntarsis, Well, that genus of beetle was found to be dubious, so the name is free and ready to be used by scientists once again in reference to this early Jurassic predator.
This is not how taxonomy works. Once a genus name has been used, even if the genus is synonymized, it can't be used again. The only situation where this does not apply is a situation like Brontosaurus, where a genus is synonymized, but then the genus is synonymized with is split, then the name could be used. But this is not the situation with Syntactis, because Syntactis was synonymized due to its name being preoccupied by a beetle, and even though that beetle has been synonymized, the genus name cannot be reused. I don't particularly like these rules either, and they don't really make that much sense, but these are the rules.
The Ankylosaurs we see get eaten by Dilophosaurs is a neat addition. We don't get to see many prosauropods in media.
If Red Raptor had actually done his research here, he would know that the term prosauropod has been outdated since the mid-2000s.
I wouldn't normally have a problem with someone calling non-sauropodomorphs prosauropods, but Red Raptor Writes is also a big nitpicker of things like this, so when he gets something wrong, he has no excuse.
In the intro, he has a disclaimer about how the series features discussion of human evolution. It then doesn't mention any of the segments of the series relating to human evolution throughout the rest of the video. This is because he doesn't believe that humans evolved. He believes that all other animals evolved, but that humans, and only humans, were put on Earth separately and in their already fully formed and modern state by God.
The Brontotheres, aka the Embellitherium. The show succeeded in showing off their strange crests as mainly for display, being too delicate for combat. Plus, even the adolescents have them, which is factual, since these ornaments were present on all skulls found, young and old. So Embellitherium probably wasn't very sexually dimorphic.
He, of course, doesn't point out at all in this segment that Embolitherium almost definitely had a large, fleshy, soft tissue structure covering their crests.
Tigers belong to a specific species of feline called Panthera tigris.
If we're going to be specific and nitpick, which he does, so I will do in response, then I will point out that tigers are not a feline, they are a pantherine. They are a felid, but not a feline, which is members of felinee. They are pantherines, or members of Pantherinae, which are the big cats.
The entire lion lifestyle is copied here. The saber-tooths live in prides, females do most of the hunting, and the males battle for control over the pride. Oh, and the cubs from the previous male will be killed off if a challenger wins. African lions are in the same genus as tigers, Panthera, so they're not close relatives of half-tooth. Therefore, they don't make good analogs for these cats. However, fossil evidence does seem to point to a pack or pride structure, although this idea is not without pushback.
There is no evidence for pride structure in Smilodon, where there is evidence of social groups, but it is incredibly unlikely that they would have had a lion-like pride social structure.
The little pony dudes Propaleotherium also find themselves lumped into Eurohippus.
I have no idea why he claims this, because it isn't true. Some species of Propaleotherium were lumped into Eurohippus, but it's still a valid genus, and there is still a species known from the Mesopit where the episode that appears is set.
Paraceratherium is no longer considered to be the largest mammal anymore. I don't think the documentary specifically claims that it is, but it basically pushes this idea. Nowadays, Paleoloxodon is considered to be the largest mammal ever.
Neither Paraceratherium nor Paleoloxodon were ever considered to be the largest mammal ever, as that title has always belonged to the blue whale.
Wow, 43 feet. Sounds like Dan Schneider's dream.
If there is any kind of god that exists, please get me out of here now.
Like I said about Nothonychus before, paleontologists already knew about feathers in Therizinosaurs since downy feathers were found in Bapiosaurus.
There is no evidence of feathers in derived Therizinosaurs, and in fact it is possible that they may have been too large for them to serve any function, And now, the moment you've all been waiting for.
There is clear sexual dimorphism between the two, count 'em, two genders within the genus.
I'm surprised that Pteranodon was intelligent enough to have the socially constructed concept of gender within their species, and I'm baffled as to how we have some kind of fossil evidence of this. Jokes aside, this is obviously a ham-fisted, unfunny, transphobic joke shoved in there for no real reason, and not only that, but it's also stupid because it relies on this conflating of sex, which is the biological characteristics of an organism, and gender, the socially constructed internal identity of a person. Pteranodon didn't have gender because they weren't intelligent enough to have a social constructed concept such as that, and he's wrong in that there are neither two sexes nor two genders.
It's common to see Giganotosaurus and Argentinosaurus living together like they do here, but in actuality, the Giga came before. It was their close relative Mapusaurus that lived alongside Argentinosaurus 95 million years ago.
There is one slight, teeny tiny problem with this. Mapusaurus wasn't named till 2006, 3 years after the episode released, and at the time of production, its remains were tentatively assigned to Giganotosaurus.
Not gonna lie, this isn't my favorite show. It can feel a little too narrow in scope, only focusing on predators and how cool it is to watch animals tear each other to shreds. So there is that hint of awesome bro-ness.
I don't know what he's talking about. I would not call Sea Monsters awesome bro in the least. It does focus mostly on predators, but it also is still a nature documentary, focusing on them in their natural environment.
Too bad Nigel never gives us a generic name though, so we can only make educated guesses as to what animal he's actually holding. Maybe small Pentacopterus? Maybe the creators just made up what they thought to be the average looking sea scorpion? I really couldn't say. Based on the time period and anatomy of this creature, my best bet is we're looking at a Camarasaurus, a giant nautilid capable of growing over 30 feet long. If only Nigel could use its actual name, so I wouldn't have done 10 minutes of extra research.
If he had done even the tiniest bit of research, he could have figured out that both of these are identified by a generic name in external media, with them being Megaloraptor and Camarasaurus respectively.
In that clip, he also claimed Camarasaurus grew to 30 feet or 10 meters long. This is wrong in two respects. For one, the largest species of Camarasaurus, Camarasaurus giganteum, is now classified as belonging to the related genus Endosaurus, and two, the supposedly 10-meter specimen is based on a 9-meter long shell which has since been lost, and as we can no longer actually measure it, there is a possibility that this was exaggerated.
But did smaller species of Raptidon, Pyroraptor, and whatever Tarascosaurus was live on Hattag Island?
In the case of Raptidon, the answer is yes, kind of. There was in fact a very small Raptidon known from Hattag Island, Zalmoxes. But, in fact, recent discoveries have shown that Zalmoxes is actually closer to the size of ancestral Raptidons, with Raptidon experiencing the reverse of island dwarfism, arriving on the mainland and becoming much bigger than its ancestors.
In the Geducta Formation, where Whitetip's journey takes place, there was a variety of oviraptorids, two of which were Oviraptor itself and City Patty. The latter is what's shown in the episode, but it's referred to as its much smaller cousin. City Patty was among the largest in his family, while the actual Oviraptor was about the same size as Velociraptor.
This is because Chitty Patty wasn't named until the series was in production, and as such, when it was written, they hedged their bets by using Oviraptor for the, as at the time, undescribed Oviraptorid, which is now known as Chitty Patty.
I'm also not a big fan of the host, Bill Oddie. He has this over-the-top way of presenting that gets a little annoying.
Shame on you, Red Raptor. Shame on you.
But Bill Oddie thought that liberal estimate sounded so cool he had to go with it. He sides with the Green Party, so it makes sense.
Why? Why did you feel this was necessary to point out and a necessary joke to make?
I know there's also a series on cavemen, but I'm personally not that interested in the topic, and we'll end it here.
By I'm not personally interested in the topic, he means I don't believe in human evolution, which the series is about, and I don't want everyone to know that. He mutilates the name of the genus Cephalaspis, pronouncing it as
Cephalepsis. If you guys hate spiders as much as Jameson, then lucky you, because the Mesodile didn't exist. This wasn't negligence on the part of the BBC, they just got really unlucky. You see, there was thought to be a giant spider called Megarachne, but after all the spider scenes were already made, this nightmare got reclassified as a freshwater Eurypterid from South America. Despite not being a spider, it still stuck with this misnomer. It would be nice for me to overlook this little mishap and put it in the outdated section, but truth be told, the Mesodile was dead on arrival, so I can't justify it.
This is incredibly unfair on the creators of the show, who, as he points out, had already finished with the Mesodile scenes, and it would be completely unfeasible for them to change them that late in production. And we're starting off this video strong with another sad attempt at a transphobic joke.
And I've gotta mention the presence of sexual dimorphism, which occurs in living and extinct elephants because, you know, there are real biological distinctions between males and females.
What is he even talking about here? Nobody is denying sexual dimorphism exists. He's clearly taking a jab at trans people, but trans people don't deny that sexual dimorphism exists. If humans weren't sexually dimorphic, then trans people wouldn't exist, because there'd be no difference between the two sexes. I assume he's talking about how people will talk about how there isn't actually that much difference between the sexes, which is true. There's a reason why just taking hormones can change your body from male to female or female to male. There are a couple of things I'll mention just in this segment, but they apply to all of his videos, like the fact that he uses art pieces as examples, but does not credit the artists, which he should, and even when he does credit the artists, he's inconsistent, only crediting some things and not others. He also should not be able to accurately rank it by its accuracy without pointing out every inaccuracy, something impossible in a 16-minute video, especially when about a quarter of the runtime is wasted on dumb and pointless jokes. For some god-forsaken reason, he feels it is necessary to make these jokes.
We might be getting into some Dan Schneider territory here, but we should talk about feet. Now that that's over, Tarantino, you can stop watching. This short movie briefly shows off a giant squid called Tusateuthis. Well, unfortunately for the writers, it has since been synonymized with Encoteuthis.
Well, unfortunately for Red Raptor Writes, Tusateuthis has not definitively been synonymized with Encoteuthis. Several species were synonymized with Encoteuthis, but the genus, although it is a nomen dubium, is still, as of early February 2024, its own genus.
Terror birds and ground sloths came from South America and immigrated to North America, being two of the few successful South American groups to do so. Luckily for them, the wall hasn't been built yet, but I say we keep those terror birds out of here and make them pay for it.
He really thought that was funny. He really actually thought that he was being funny there.
Mosasaurs descending from lizards or lizard-like ancestors.
This is, on the face of it, preposterous. Nobody believes that mosasaurs evolved from lizard-like ancestors. They are definitively believed by everyone, even David Peters believes this, that they are descended from lizards themselves.
If you think Australia is a bad place today, where everything wants to kill you,
I am not capable of putting into words how annoyed at this I am, but I'm just going to say
Get a better fucking joke. There are so many things that you can mock us Australians for that aren't, oh, we've got dangerous creatures. If you want to see some facts, more people die from spider bites every year in the US than have died from spider bites in Australia in the entirety of the century.
A tiny pachycephalosaurid from Canada, featured in this dino doc called Mycocephalae, sometimes Microcephalae. Unfortunately, there's no formal description for the little mushroom head, so these names are purely informal, practically just nicknames.
Okay, so why did you bring it up? The species does not need to be formally described for you to feature it in a doc. It's okay to feature undescribed species if we know them well.
Back to the Carnotaurus, its design is also wonky. Aside from shrink wrapping, osteoderms, and pronated wrists,
Red Raptor writes, have you actually looked at the model? Those wrists clearly are not pronated.
I recently mentioned the feathered, potentially arboreal Scansoriopteryx. Oh, and to try to push this eye hypothesis that the Scansoriopteryx used its third finger to pick out bugs, the writers forgot that finger would have had feathers on it, long feathers, so not really useful for that purpose.
What Red Raptor writes forgot is that Scansoriopteryx's arms should not be covered in feathers. They should in fact have bat-like wings, as is seen in their close relative, Ichi.
Ankylosaurids were great sniffers with an enlarged olfactory bulb, the part of the brain used to process smells. This would have allowed them to detect predators from a distance. It is correctly pointed out in the show that Ankylosaurus would have been like its cousin Euoplocephalus in having these complex looping nasal passages with an increased surface area. While it is possible that these were used to enhance their sense of smell, it more likely helped Ankylosaurids with heat and water balance. These strange passages also might have helped resonate sounds or a combination of these things. Whatever the case may be, it's a cool secret feature of a beloved dinosaur.
How do you manage to fuck this up? Do you just not proofread your script or something?
Also, there's the trope of the infamous sickle claws, how they were used to slice into the flesh of their prey, disemboweling it. Yeah, no. Those thin, unsharpened hooks could not slice through a sauropod's thick flesh. Maybe it's death by 1,000 paper cuts. The toxic Rex bite is back in all its absurdity. Yes, if an animal was bitten by a Rex, the wound can get an infection, but that goes with any predator, or any injury for that matter. There's no evidence for some super secret special bacteria in their teeth.
The core problem with both of these is the same. Red Raptor Writes puts both of them in the problems section, when both of them were not fully disproven until after the documentary came out. Therefore, they belong in the outdated section.
And there's also no evidence for Quetzalcoatlus being able to see urination trails with ultraviolet vision. Man, who comes up with this stuff?
Although there is of course no evidence for this in Quetzalcoatlus itself, ultraviolet vision is found in almost all modern bird species, so it is not unreasonable speculation that a pterosaur filling a similar-ish niche would have similar adaptations.
Despite me and the movie calling these hadrosaurids Edmontosaurus, this has been a point of contention over the past decade. In 2015, these Alaskan specimens were described as a separate genus, given the name Ugunaluke cookpecensis. If this review came out 7 years ago, Edmontosaurus would belong in the outdated section. However, in 2017, researchers came to the conclusion that the new Ugunaluke is a Nobundubium, a false name, since there were enough similarities between it and Edmontosaurus to reclassify it as another Edmontosaurus species. So, March of the Dinosaurs is once again in the right by calling these herbivores Edmontosaurus.
Okay, this is completely irrelevant because you can't give it points for getting something right when it was not possible for it to get it wrong, because what it would have got wrong hadn't happened yet. This would be like if I took points away from his Planet Dinosaur review because he didn't point out that Saurophaganax is now no longer considered a giant allosaur but an indeterminate sauropod when that study didn't come out for years after the video.
Strangely enough, the specific name comes from Ross Perot, the Texas billionaire who played spoiler to George Bush Sr. and got this guy elected. I would say that he sucks, but...
Did he just make a Monica Lewinsky joke in 2022? Also, I didn't catch this on first watch through of the series, but the idea that Perot got Clinton elected by stealing votes from Bush Sr. is an old right-wing conspiracy theory. In fact, Perot took votes from both sides, but I have no idea why the fuck Red Raptorites is inserting a right-wing conspiracy theory from the early 90s into a supposedly educational video about dinosaurs.
For the first time in these documentaries, we finally see Tyrannosaurus juveniles done right.
Did he just forget about When Dinosaurs Roamed America, in which he pointed out that it had also done juvenile Tyrannosaurus right?
This month, in March of 2022, a new paper led by Gregory S. Paul hypothesized that the genus Tyrannosaurus, which usually only contains the species T. rex, actually houses 3 species from the end of the Cretaceous in North America. He split T. rex into 3 species: T. rex, along with T. imperator, and T. regina.
He does rightly point out that this study is complete bullshit, but also it is completely irrelevant to everything in this video, and by the logic of his March of the Dinosaurs review, I should be able to dock him some accuracy points, because he didn't predict that Tyrannosaurus macraensis would be described in 2024.
I had this dream once that I was being chased by a Spinosaurus. Yeah, it seems plausible to me.
Irrelevant. Also, what?
And like in March of the Dinosaurs, us audiences are shown the unnamed Alaskan Edmontosaurus species. Instead of being called Ugunaluk, at this point it was still referred to as Edmontosaurus. The name Ugunaluk rose in 2015, only to fall back to Edmontosaurus 2 years later. So whether it be luck, coincidence, or knowledge of the future, Planet Dinosaur used the right name.
Is he like actually stupid? There's no way that they could have called it Ugrunaluk, because Ugrunaluk did not get named for several years after the production. Therefore there was no way they could get it wrong, because the circumstances for them to get it wrong would not existed yet.
Epidexipteryx. Here it's shown using its long fingers to pick out bugs from tree bark like an eye. However, in 2015 came the discovery of another closely related Scansoriopterid, Yi-Chi. The Yi-Chi specimen revealed the presence of a bat-like skin membrane between the fingers, maybe used in gliding.
Apparently he actually learnt about Ichi since his Bizarre Dinosaurs video. Unfortunately he didn't learn how to pronounce his name properly.
Pretty much the whole Dejucta formation is pushed 10 million years back in time. Protoceratops, Oviraptor, and Sauroornithoides lived 75 instead of 85 million years ago.
Did he even actually watch the series? Protoceratops does not appear at all, other than, I guess, in some of the visual demonstration cutaway things. But I don't know what he's talking about here, because Protoceratops definitely doesn't appear in Planet Dinosaur.
Planet Dinosaur brings us back to Hattag Island.
It is pronounced Hatzeg, as in Hatzegopteryx, hence the little accent below the T, but I guess Red Raptorites is too stupid to even look into that.
It's not even feathered here. Even, again, when dinosaurs roamed America, recognize that giving Therizinosaurids feathers is a no-brainer.
I've said this before in the series, and I'll say it again. There is no definitive evidence of feathering in larger Therizinosaurs. The evidence of feathering we have is from smaller, more basal Therizinosaurs, and the larger, more derived ones would have had, as I said, larger body sizes, and so it was less likely that they would need a feathery covering for insulation.
The narrator's pronunciations of generic names.
All this fuss wakes up the Microraptor, a Velociraptor, Therizinosaurus, the Pterosaurus.
I don't typically mention this, like, as long as an attempt was made, I don't get too upset, but these were awful.
There is literally nothing wrong with how the narrator pronounces Therizinosaurus. I don't know what he's talking about here.
This animal's feet also appear incorrect. We don't see them for long, so I had to go Tarantino mode and stare while they were on screen. Okay, Dan Schneider, you can click away now.
Does he realize that he doesn't have to make these jokes whenever feet are mentioned?
Tyrannosaurus, along with pretty much every non-avian theropod, most likely had immobile lips.
Though I will not dispute the truth of this statement, I will dispute its placement in the problems section of his video, as the lip hypothesis was not commonly accepted, and I don't even know if it existed yet in the 90s when this was made.
What's also annoying is how commonly the term species is used to refer to a genus. A species constitutes a group of individual animals that have extremely similar morphology with a population capable of breeding. A genus is a natural grouping of species with only minor differences. Some genera, like Tyrannosaurus, have only one species though. Take Panthera for example. Panthera is a genus of cats. But then there are species, Panthera leo, which are lions, Panthera onca, jaguars, Panthera tigris, tigers, and so on. They're each very similar animals, but with minor differences, so you can't count them as the same species.
If you're trying to talk about the differences between genera, not genre, genera, and species, then Varanus might be possibly the worst example you can use, given that that genus is a taxonomic nightmare and should probably be split into multiple different genera. He also spells Varanus wrong. Given that he's talking about paleontology, his definition of species does not particularly apply to extinct creatures, given that we have no idea whether separate populations could interbreed.
The dreaded Mosasaurus just chills on a reef to get its teeth cleaned. We see this happen to modern apex predators too. Sharks and remoras.
Actually, we don't see this in sharks and remoras, given that remoras don't feed off parasites, but instead feed off the feces of their host.
Bro, why is every animal a child predator in this show? I think you mean minor attracted reptile.
Please end my suffering.
The one exception I'll make for these positives is the portrayal of Tetradraco. Yeah, maybe 5 years ago when it was described as a pteranodonted, this would have been perfect. Too bad that in 2020, a wing was assigned to the genus, then determined to be an Asdarchid instead. So Tetradraco would have been more like Phosphatodraco.
Too bad for Red Raptor writes that the reclassification of Tetradraco as a Asdarchid is not definitive, and it is still tentatively placed as either an Asdarchid or a Pteranodonted.
Now, let's go back to Velociraptor. The number of species belonging to the genus is unclear, with V. osmulske potentially being closer to Linhiraptor than V. mongoliensis. Then there's a recently named third species, V. vadarostrum.
Actually, Velociraptor vadarostrum was not recently named, given that it was never officially named at all. It was unofficially described in a thesis, which was leaked.
Even with fine attention to details on the pterosaurs, their wingtips are still too pointy. Modern reconstructions of pterosaur wings make them more round.
Now, this is an interesting thing that I somehow haven't brought up in any of these 4 videos, which is a major myth that Red Raptor Writes perpetrates, because in reality there's no evidence that rounded wingtips is more likely than pointed wingtips, and most fossil wings just show pointed wingtips, and this is something that Red Raptor Writes has and continues to spread as if it's true when it's not. It's completely untrue.
Tetradraco. I brought up how this supposed pteranodonted was recovered as an Asdarchid in one 2020 study. Well, since that study, new publications still place Tetradraco as a pteranodonted. While their ulnas bore some superficial similarities to Asdarchids, they still closer resemble those of pteranodontians. That means this portrayal of Tetradraco as a close relative of Pteranodon still works.
Unfortunately for him, he's not off the hook with his corrections. In fact, he overcorrects. Recent studies have found that Tetradraco was probably a Pteranodonted, but it definitely isn't definitive. It may still be an Asdarchid.
One unfortunate creature that's dead on arrival is their Dunkleosteus. The body size and shape now proposed for this supposedly 8 to 9 meter placoderm is radically different than the one presented here that's been haunting our nightmares since sea monsters. Rather, now we're given a shorter, more stout 4 meter fish with a big head. Experts before were trying to piece together the missing body by using what we know of other very variable placoderms. But in 2023, a more reliable method was used of measuring the distance between the eye and the operculum, then extrapolating an overall body length from there. I feel bad that the artists couldn't have known such a radical shift was coming. This isn't the fault of any negligence on their end. Science simply marched on at the exact wrong time for them.
He puts this in the negative rather than the outdated section, despite literally pointing out that the study came out after the series finished production, so they had no hope of getting it right.
Iguanodon appeared about 126 million years ago in what is now Belgium and Spain. Yup, I intentionally did not include the UK in there because, long story short, that material has been reassigned to Mantellosaurus and Beryllium.
Apparently Red Raptor writes forgot that Iguanodon bernasartensis is also known from the Isle of Wight, which, last I checked, is part of Britain.
Coolosuchus lived about 120 million years ago in Australia because everything there just wants you dead, even back then.
I've said it before, and I'll say it again. Get a better fucking joke. I'm so fucking tired of people making the same, oh, Australian animals are really deadly jokes. Get something better. Fuck you.
But that's enough talking about feet. I don't want to give Dan Schneider any new ideas.
I'm so glad that's the last joke of that kind I'm ever gonna have to listen to.
They literally are aquatic monitor lizards, and we certainly get that.
Mosasaurs are not literally aquatic monitor lizards. For them to literally be monitor lizards, they would have to be members of the so-called genus Varanus, or at the very least the order Varanoidea, which they certainly are not, being more closely related to snakes, in fact.
In the first trailers, seemingly everyone overlooked it because it's cute. I noted how the proportions looked kind of off and weird, and I think I know why. It's the neck. The artist gave Zalmoxes that modern hadrosaur neck where it's chunky and filled with muscle and fat, something akin to Parasaurolophus, but I don't think it really works here with Zalmoxes.
Whether you think it works has no weight on the scientific accuracy of the series. It's okay to have an opinion about the design, but you don't need to dedicate an entire segment to it in an accuracy review. And that was every single thing with Red Raptor Writes' documentary review series. I hope you enjoyed watching this because I certainly didn't enjoy making it. Just a few channel things. I might not be able to get out videos weekly anymore because I just am running out of ideas for videos to do. Also, I have a second channel and I have a Discord server, both linked in the description. I hope you've enjoyed this, and I hope you have a good day.